My name is Lenora Villanueva. I'm 28 years old, and I used to believe that if you stayed consistent, if you showed up, paid your bills, kept your promises, life eventually met you halfway. That's the lie I lived inside. Because the truth is, you can do everything right and still end up financing your own betrayal, if the people closest to you decide you're easier to use than to love. I met Ethan Caldwell on a morning that started like every other. Coffee gone lukewarm, hair still damp at the nape of my neck, brain already running through a list of things I needed to handle before the day swallowed me whole. I was 24, 3 years into my career, responding to what should have been a routine domestic complaint at an apartment complex on the east side. Neighbors called about screaming at 5 in the morning, doors slamming, someone sobbing loud enough to rattle the hallway. When I knocked, the door opened a crack, then wider. And there he was, Ethan. He looked like he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. Sweatpants, an oversized shirt, bare feet. His face was flushed with embarrassment, like he'd been dragged into chaos against his will. Behind him, I could hear a woman and a man yelling at each other like they were trying to rip the walls apart with sound alone. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said immediately. Once, twice, like apologies were oxygen and he was terrified of running out. Turns out he was the roommate, caught in the crossfire of his best friend's relationship explosion. Ethan had been trying to calm them down when the neighbors finally called it in. He offered me coffee. He offered me a witness statement, and when my pen paused over my notepad, he gave me his number, in case you need anything else. I knew what that meant. 2 days later, I called him. And for 4 years, I thought I'd found something rare, a man who didn't demand I shrink to make him feel big. He worked in compliance, quiet job, steady hours. He admired that I was disciplined, that I didn't waste money, that I built my life with my hands instead of waiting for it to be handed to me. When we moved in together after 2 years, he insisted on splitting utilities, even though I told him he didn't have to. "I want this to be equal," he said, and he sounded sincere enough that I believed him. Looking back, I can see the foundation being poured, carefully, deliberately, not love, not equality, positioning. But before I tell you how the man who held my face like I was fragile glass turned into someone who could laugh at me behind my back, you need to understand my family. Because that's where this story really begins. And it's why the betrayal landed like a blade between my ribs instead of a slap across the cheek. I have an older sister, Jade Villanueva. She's 31. And in my parents' world, Jade isn't just the eldest. She's the chosen. The one with potential. The one with dreams. The one whose failures are always framed as temporary setbacks, while my achievements are treated like obligations I owed the family for existing. Jade hasn't held a real job in 6 years. 6 years. Meanwhile, I've worked since I was 16, bagging groceries, cleaning offices overnight, doing security shifts, taking any job that didn't ask too many questions, and paid enough to keep the lights on. I didn't get a safety net. I didn't get time to find myself. I got bills, responsibility, and parents who looked at my reliability like it was my personality. At 21, I put myself through the academy. At 22, I was on patrol. I climbed quietly, steadily, never flashy, never reckless. By 28, I had a solid career, decent savings, and a small rental property that was starting to pay for itself. But none of that mattered at family dinners, because Jade could show up late, smelling like smoke, laughing too loud with no plan for her life, and my parents would still light up like she'd just cured cancer. Every holiday, Jade found some way to dim me. If I got a commendation, she'd mention how my job was just paperwork and drama. If I talked about buying my house, she'd compare it to some friend's parents' mansion. If I mentioned a promotion, she'd pivot to her newest business idea, something about investing or starting a brand, always vague, always just around the corner. And my parents, they'd nod, encourage, praise, like Jade's daydreams were more valuable than my reality. The bitterness in her eyes used to confuse me. I couldn't understand why my success offended her so deeply, until I realized my success was proof that her excuses were choices. Here's where Grandpa comes in. My grandfather, Tom Villanueva, my dad's father, spent his last 3 years in a nursing home. Alzheimer's took him in slow, cruel pieces. Some days he recognized me. Some days he didn't. Some days he called me by my father's name or looked through me like I wasn't there. Do you know who visited him every single week? Me. Just me. Jade never went once. too busy with her projects, which usually meant sleeping until noon and playing games or scrolling on her phone. My parents went maybe once a month, and even then they complained about how depressing it was. But I was there every Saturday, 3 to 5, like clockwork. I brought him his favorite snacks, sat with him while he watched old westerns, even when he didn't understand the plot anymore, listened to the same stories on repeat, held his hand when he got scared and asked where his wife was, my grandmother, dead for years. I showed up because he was family, and because nobody else cared enough to be uncomfortable for a few hours. When Grandpa Tom died during my 3rd year on the job, the family learned he'd changed his will. He left everything to me. $230,000, every cent he'd saved. Jade got nothing. My parents got nothing. And holy God, the way the room changed when that was read. I can still feel it. Like air got sucked out and replaced with smoke. Jade stared at me like I'd stolen her birthright. The mask slipped completely that day. At the funeral reception, while people were still crying, she hissed that Grandpa must have been confused, that I must have manipulated a senile old man. My father tried guilt first. Family shares everything, he said. Your grandfather would want you to help your sister. I told him Grandpa knew exactly who Jade was, exactly who visited him, exactly who didn't. My mother cried real tears, the kind meant to weaponize pity. She asked how I could be so selfish when Jade needed help getting on her feet. I said Jade needed a job. They called me heartless, greedy, betraying family values. And here's where I admit my mistake. The constant pressure got to me. Even though I knew Jade was a leech, even though I knew my parents were enabling her, even though I could hear Grandpa's voice in my head, soft but firm, telling me I deserved what he left me. I started helping anyway. $300 a month toward Jade's rent. Just until she stabilizes, my mom said, like Jade was a wounded animal and not a grown woman allergic to responsibility. Every time I sent the money, Jade's resentment didn't shrink. It grew, because it wasn't gratitude in her eyes at family dinners. It was entitlement. Like $300 was an insult instead of a gift she didn't deserve. And Ethan, he watched all of it. The first family dinner Ethan attended should have been my warning sign. My mom fawned over Jade, who arrived late with a fake apology and a smug smile. My dad asked me about work for 90 seconds before pivoting to JD's latest opportunity, some crypto scheme that sounded like a scam wrapped in optimism. Ethan sat there with that polite, tight smile, but I caught him studying Jade with a strange focus. Not attraction exactly, something colder, as if he was taking measurements. On the drive home, Ethan was quiet. Then he said softly, "Your family is interesting." I explained the dynamic, the golden child, the way Jade never had consequences, the way my parents treated my stability like a resource they could draw from. Ethan nodded. Then, like he was just making conversation, he asked about Grandpa's money. "Is it separate?" he asked. "Legally, I mean." "Inheritance stays separate unless you commingle," I said. Something flickered in his expression. Quick, almost invisible. Annoyance? Disappointment? He recovered fast, asked what I planned to do with it. I told him I'd invested most of it. Kept living simple, built a foundation. He smiled and said he admired that about me. And I believed him. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling and told myself the uneasy feeling in my chest was just old family trauma. Nothing more. I didn't know it yet, but the ground had already started shifting under my feet. And the people I loved most were quietly counting down to the moment it would split open. The changes didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't understand when they ask later, "How didn't you notice?" Betrayal doesn't usually kick down the door. It rearranges the furniture while you're asleep and waits to see how long it takes you to trip. At first, Ethan just seemed distracted. He started staying late at work more often. Compliance audits, internal reviews, deadlines that couldn't wait. When I asked questions, he'd sigh like I was inconveniencing him, like my concern was a flaw in my character instead of a normal response to distance. Our routines shifted. We stopped eating dinner together. He'd already eaten, or he wasn't hungry, or he'd grab something on the way home. His phone became an extension of his hand, screen always angled away from me, password changed without comment. When I teased him about it once, lightly, he didn't laugh. He snapped. "Not everything is about you, Lenora." That one sentence lodged under my skin like a splinter. Meanwhile, Jade started acting different too. Not worse, not better. Confident. She stopped complaining about money. Stopped asking my parents to cover things. She showed up to family dinners dressed better. New shoes, new bag, a smug little curve to her mouth like she knew something the rest of us didn't. When I asked how she was paying rent now, she waved it off. "Things are working out," she said. "You don't need to worry about me so much." That should have been a relief. Instead, my stomach tightened, because Jade had never once told me not to worry before. Family dinners became unbearable. Ethan stopped coming altogether, claiming exhaustion. When he did show up, he barely spoke to me. But I noticed the way his eyes tracked Jade when she talked, how he leaned forward when she laughed, how they shared looks across the table that vanished the second I caught them. I told myself I was projecting. That was easier than admitting what my instincts were screaming. Then came the comments. Little ones, sharp enough to draw blood only if you pressed on them. Ethan started making jokes about my job in front of his friends, called it just enforcement, like I was a hall monitor instead of someone who worked nights and weekends to keep other people safe. He complained about my car, said it made me look stuck. Once, after I said no to investing in one of Jade's half-baked ideas, he rolled his eyes and said, "You're really stingy for someone who got lucky with an inheritance." Lucky. Like Grandpa's death had been a scratch-off ticket. Our sex life died quietly. Weeks went by without touch. When I reached for him in bed, he'd shift away, say he was tired, say he had a headache. When I tried to talk about it, he accused me of being needy. I stopped asking. That's when the lying got sloppy. One night in late October, Ethan said he had drinks with coworkers. I got off shift early and drove home out of habit. Only his car wasn't there. No problem. People move around. Except the next morning, his jacket was hanging on the chair, untouched. And when I checked the credit card statement a few days later, I saw charges from a bar across town. A bar I'd never been to. A bar suspiciously close to Jade's apartment. Another night, he said he was working late. I called his office, something I'd never done before, and the receptionist told me everyone had left an hour earlier. When I asked Ethan about it, he snapped again. "Why are you interrogating me?" That word, interrogating, was almost funny, given my job. Almost. I started paying attention the way I'd been trained to, not emotionally, observationally. Patterns, timelines, inconsistencies. Ethan's car wasn't home when it should have been. His stories didn't line up. He showered the second he walked through the door, like he was trying to wash something off. He smiled at texts he didn't want me to see. And Jade? Jade stopped answering my calls. She texted instead, short, polite, distant. The final push came on a Sunday night. Ethan told me he couldn't make family dinner, again, because of a last-minute issue, so I went alone. Jade was already there, sitting in my parents' living room like she owned the place. She looked relaxed, comfortable, not stressed, not broke. Halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up, straight at me, and smiled. Not warmly, triumphantly. A few minutes later, she excused herself to take a call. Through the window, I watched her pace the driveway, laughing softly, brushing her hair behind her ear, the way she used to do when she was flirting. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might be having a medical event. When she came back in, my mom asked who it was. "Just a friend," Jade said casually. Her eyes flicked to mine. I went home that night with a knot in my stomach and a cold, heavy certainty settling into my bones. Ethan was on the couch when I walked in, watching TV. Barely looked up. I asked if he'd eaten. He said yes, ordered in earlier, but there were no containers in the trash, no dishes in the sink. When I leaned down to kiss him, he turned his head so my lips hit his cheek. "I'm tired," he said. The tone meant don't push. So I didn't. I waited. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered information quietly. I took screenshots. I wrote notes, dates, times, locations. I tracked credit card charges, drove by places he said he was supposed to be. The last thing I needed was coincidence. And then, one Friday night, Ethan told me he was going to happy hour. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, and I followed it. Not because I wanted to be right, because I needed to be sure. He didn't go downtown. He didn't go anywhere near his office. He drove straight across town, to Jade's apartment complex. The same building I'd been helping pay rent on for almost 3 years. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and felt something inside me go very, very still. Not heartbreak, clarity. My boyfriend was sleeping with my sister, and I was paying for the roof over their heads. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't confront him. I sat there in the dark, rain starting to tap against my windshield, and made a decision. I wasn't going to react. I was going to plan. Because emotion makes you sloppy, and I was done being sloppy with my life. Once you see it, really see it, there's no going back. That night, I didn't follow Ethan inside Jade's apartment complex. I didn't confront him. I didn't text. I didn't cry in the car like some people expect in stories like this. I drove home, slow, controlled, every breath measured. Because the second you act before you understand the full scope of the damage, you give power to the people who never deserved it in the first place. I needed certainty, not suspicion, not instinct, not gut feelings I could later be gaslit into doubting. I needed proof. The next morning, I played my role perfectly. I made coffee. I asked about his night. I kissed him goodbye. Ethan barely looked at me, already absorbed in his phone, smiling at something I wasn't meant to see. He left without saying I love you. That used to hurt. Now it just confirmed things. I spent the weekend doing what I do best, being patient, methodical, and quiet. I installed a full camera system in the house. Living room, hallway, entryway, no bedroom. I didn't need that. What I needed was movement, timing, behavior. I changed every password I had. Banking, email, investments, cloud storage. Opened a new account and transferred most of my liquid funds. I didn't touch joint expenses yet. I wanted everything to look normal. Then I made one call that felt like closing a chapter. I called Jade's landlord, told him I wouldn't be covering rent anymore. He didn't argue. Actually, he sounded relieved. Said Jade had been a problem tenant for months. Late payments, noise complaints, random people coming and going. He thanked me for being upfront and said he'd handle things from there. That told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, Ethan's lies became predictable, almost lazy. Monday, working late. Camera footage showed him leaving the house dressed nicer than usual. Tuesday, same excuse. Wednesday, again. Every night, his car went to the same place. Jade's. On Thursday, I decided I needed more than visuals. I needed to hear what they thought of me when they believed I wasn't listening. I told Ethan I'd picked up a double shift and wouldn't be home until late. He didn't even pretend to be disappointed, just nodded and said, okay. That alone felt like a confession. I left the house at 6, drove 3 blocks away and parked. Pulled up the camera feed on my phone. At 7:28 p.m., Jade walked up to my front door like she owned it. She had a key. My sister had a key to my house, to the house I'd bought with Grandpa's money, the house Ethan never helped pay for, the house I thought was my sanctuary. She let herself in without hesitation. At 7:30, Ethan followed. They kissed in my living room. Not a hesitant kiss, not a guilty one. Familiar, comfortable, earned. I turned off the bedroom feed the second it activated. I didn't need to see that. The footage saved automatically to the cloud. Time-stamped. Undeniable. But I still needed audio. So I drove back. Parked down the street, slipped inside through the back door I knew they'd forgotten to lock. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. That scared me more than anything. I positioned myself in the hallway closet, door cracked just enough, phone recording. And then I heard her. Jade's voice, clear, sharp, dripping with contempt. She's so pathetic, she said, laughing softly. Honestly, I'm amazed she hasn't figured it out yet. Ethan chuckled. That's because Lenora has always been the naive one. Thinks she's better than everyone because she works hard and plays responsible. My vision tunneled. She comes home smelling like sweat, Jade continued. Acts like she's building this perfect little life. Meanwhile, I'm finally getting what I deserve. Ethan's voice lowered, smug, bitter. She has no idea we've been doing this for 6 months. 6 months, Jade laughed. That same laugh she used when we were kids and she got away with something. It's poetic, really, she said. She's been paying my rent while I've been sleeping with her boyfriend. Ethan snorted. Total sucker. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. They talked about Grandpa next. Said he'd been senile. Said he didn't know what he was doing. Said the inheritance should have been ours. Hers by blood, his by proximity. Then Jade said something that made my blood go ice cold. Well, it won't matter soon anyway. Once we hit common law status, I'm entitled to half of everything. Ethan asked what she meant. She explained, confidently, incorrectly, that after living together for 3 years, she could claim half my assets, half the house, half the inheritance, maybe even alimony. She sounded proud. Prepared. Like this wasn't an affair, it was a strategy. We split it 50-50, she said. Take whatever's left of the inheritance, sell the house, disappear to California, start over. Ethan asked, what about me? She laughed. She'll cry, maybe yell, but she won't do anything. She's too weak. She always caves. I recorded everything. 10 minutes of pure, unfiltered truth. Every insult, every plan, every assumption about how small I was. Then I left the house the same way I came in. Sat in my car until nearly 3 in the morning, replaying the audio, not because I needed to, but because I needed to feel it harden into resolve. This wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy, and they underestimated me in the worst possible way. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Then I went straight to a lawyer. I didn't cry in his office. I didn't ramble. I handed him the recording, the footage, the financial breakdowns. When the audio finished, he smiled. Slow, sharp. "This," he said, tapping the table, "is beautiful." He explained everything they'd gotten wrong. No common law marriage in this state. No claim to inheritance. No legal standing at all. With this evidence, I could remove Ethan immediately. No eviction, no negotiation. I had leverage, and I was going to use it. But not yet. I wanted them together. I wanted them confident. I wanted them sitting across from me when their entire fantasy collapsed. So I waited. Played the perfect girlfriend for one more week. Smiled, listened, watched. And let them believe the lie they loved most, that I was still blind. Waiting was the hardest part. Not because I was afraid, but because restraint feels unnatural when you finally understand the full shape of the knife in your back. For an entire week, I played the version of myself they expected. I came home at normal hours. I asked about Ethan's day. I laughed at the right moments. Ethan mirrored me. Almost cheerful now. Lighter. Like a man who believed the ending was already written in his favor. He even started touching me again. Casual, possessive gestures that made my skin crawl. A hand on my lower back. A kiss on my temple that felt rehearsed. Jade texted me for the first time in weeks. "Family dinner at your place sounds nice," she wrote. "Haven't all been together in a while." I stared at the message, feeling something close to satisfaction settle in my chest. "Sunday at 6, I replied. "Big announcement." She responded instantly. "Oh!" I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. I invited my parents too. Told them Ethan and I had news. My mother squealed into the phone. My father asked if it had anything to do with finances. I said, "You'll see." Sunday came quietly. I spent the day preparing, not just the food, but the room. I positioned my phone where it could record everything. Laptop open on the coffee table, volume tested, audio file queued, camera feeds synced and backed up, every angle accounted for. Dinner itself was almost pleasant. Pasta, salad, wine. Jade arrived, dressed like she was attending an award ceremony. Hair done, makeup flawless, confidence radiating off her. She hugged me too tightly, whispered, "I'm so excited for you." Ethan showed up last, smug and relaxed, like a man who thought he was about to cash out. My parents settled in, smiling, oblivious. We ate. We made small talk. Jade kept shooting me looks like she was waiting for fireworks. Ethan barely hid his impatience. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. "I wanted to talk to you all about something important," I said calmly. Jade leaned forward, eyes bright. Ethan smirked. "I know about the affair," I continued. Silence fell so fast it felt physical. Jade's face drained of color. Ethan's smile vanished, like it had never existed. "I know you've been sleeping with my sister for 6 months," I said. "I know about the plan to steal half my inheritance. I know everything." Ethan stammered. "What? Lenora, you're being crazy." I hit play. Jade's voice filled the room. "She's so pathetic." Ethan's followed. "Total sucker." My mother gasped. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Jade's hands started shaking. Ethan looked like he might throw up. When the audio finished, no one spoke. Jade recovered first, always the fastest to weaponize rage. She stood up, arms crossed. "Okay, so what? I've lived here long enough to have rights. This is my home too." "No," I said, "it isn't." Ethan jumped in, his voice sharp. "You're nothing without that inheritance, Lenora. A boring middle-class woman who got lucky." I looked at him and felt nothing. Jade turned on him suddenly. "You're not helping." "What?" Ethan snapped. You thought what?" she screamed. "That I'd let you take my half?" She grabbed the vase off the side table and swung. The sound it made when it hit Ethan's temple was sickening. He went down hard. Blood spread across my floor like ink. I called emergency services immediately. Calm, precise. By the time paramedics arrived, Jade was hysterical. Ethan was barely conscious. The police came next. I showed them the recording. They didn't even hesitate. Jade was escorted out in handcuffs. Ethan left on a stretcher. My parents sat frozen on my couch, staring at the blood. My mother finally whispered, "How could you do this to your sister?" I looked at her. She did this to herself. That night, I gave Ethan 1 hour to pack essentials. Everything else went into donation bags. By morning, I changed the locks. The house felt clean. like I could breathe again. The calls started 2 days later. I didn't answer the first one, or the second, or the third. By the fifth, I knew exactly who it was, my mother's number flashing across my screen like a warning siren I'd ignored my entire life. I answered on the sixth. She was crying before I could say hello. "Your sister is in the hospital," she sobbed. "She could have killed him, Lenora. Do you understand that?" "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady, flat, unmoved. "He has a concussion," my father cut in. 12 stitches. No insurance. The bill is over $8,000. There it was. The ask disguised as concern. "And," I said. "And he's your partner," my mother said quickly. "And she's your sister. Family doesn't abandon family." I laughed. Not loudly, not hysterically. Just enough to let them hear how absurd they sounded. "She slept with my boyfriend for 6 months," I said. "Plotted to steal my inheritance. Attacked him when the plan fell apart. And you want me to pay for it?" "She made a mistake," my mother whispered. "No," I said. "She made a series of calculated choices." My father's voice hardened. "If you don't help, you're no longer part of this family." I didn't hesitate. "Good," I said. "That saves me the trouble of leaving." I hung up and blocked both of them. Then I blocked my aunts, my cousins, anyone who'd ever told me to be the bigger person while letting Jade walk all over me. 3 weeks passed in silence. I worked. I went to the gym. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to stay unbroken. The house felt different without Ethan, without Jade's shadow hanging over every room. It felt like my own for the first time. Then one night, there was a knock at the door. I checked the camera. Jade. She looked nothing like the woman who'd strutted into my house weeks earlier. Her hair was greasy, eyes sunken, clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "What do you want?" I asked. She swallowed. "I messed up. I lost my job. I have nowhere to go." I waited. "Can you help me?" she asked. "Just a little. I'll pay you back." I went inside, came back, and handed her a $5 bill. She stared at it. "Invest in self-respect," I said. "It's the only thing you've never tried." She cried as she walked away. 2 weeks later, Ethan showed up. Gaunt, desperate, ashamed. "I ruined everything," he said. "I need help." I looked at him and felt nothing. "Figure it out," I said, like I always did. And I closed the door. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. It became quiet. And quiet was everything. Months passed. I heard through mutual contacts that Jade was couch surfing, working retail, that Ethan had moved states, taking contract work for half the pay he used to make. My parents never reached out again. Neither did I. The rental property kept paying for itself. My investments grew steadily. I repainted the living room, bought new furniture, changed the energy of the house until it finally felt like mine. Therapy helped me name things I'd never been allowed to say out loud. That love without boundaries isn't love, it's access. That loyalty without reciprocity is self-erasure. That choosing yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. A year later, I stood in Grandpa Tom's old watch, the one he'd left me, and realized something had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Some people are born into good families. The rest of us build our own. And for the first time in my life, everything I had, peace, stability, dignity,